hairy and Paul tell us that what we do does not make us righteous. Those of you who are here, are you remembering this vaguely? What we do does not make us righteous. It is our faith, our trust in God that is reckoned to us as righteousness. And to talk about that, I talked about, as Paul did, Abraham and how he was reckoned by God as righteous before all the circumcision stuff, before he took Isaac up the mountain to be sacrificed, and way before the Torah was given, these 10 commandments that we hear today. And so the big hairy deal that I made was that what we do does not make us righteous. God looks at our trust, at our faith, and reckons it to us as righteousness. So what the heck is going on today? Not only did we start, as we have been, with the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, at the beginning of the service, but then that's what our first reading was all about. Why do we make such a big hairy deal out of the 10 Commandments if what we do is not reckoned to us as righteousness? I'm going to go back. Actually, I'm going to tell a story about Rosemary Streeter. Is that okay, Bob? I remember her telling me at some point in time how she was going to confession, because remember, she was raised and spent her young adulthood as a Catholic, just as I did. How she was made to go to confession when she was in grade school, just as I was made to go to confession during grade school. And it must have been some code amongst religion teachers at all Catholic grade schools everywhere, that when your students said to you, "What do I confess? I have nothing to confess." Yeah, like grade school kids have nothing to confess, but they need a little help apparently figuring it out. The teachers would say, "Just go through the 10 Commandments. I bet you'll find something in there that you're doing wrong." And for most of us, it fell under honor your father and your mother, right? Or thou shalt not lie. Those were the two biggies. But Rosemary felt like she had honored her father and her mother, and she felt like she hadn't lied since her last confession, and so she was trying desperately to figure out what to confess. And so she went in and sat down and did the "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. This was, my last confession was on this day." And when it came time for her to actually confess, she confessed to committing adultery. And the priest just said to her, "My dear, do you know what adultery is?" And she said, "I don't know, but if I don't know what it is, I probably did it at some point in time." That had nothing to do with anything now that I think about it. Just I hear the 10 Commandments and I think of Rosemary, and so I told the story. So here is why we make such a big hairy deal out of it, and here is why actually those grade school teachers are pretty smart when they tell their kids who are going to confession to go through the 10 Commandments. Because the people of Israel had just come out of slavery. And you know what slavery is? Well, none of us have experienced slavery the way the Israelites did. But you know that when you are slaves, you do not have control over your own life or your own choices. You live under the rule of another person. Just as, see, I'm making the whole Rosemary story fit in. Just as with kids, while kids are not slaves, they certainly aren't allowed to make all of their own choices, right? I'm remembering my wonderful mother and father when I was young, making plenty of choices for me that I did not like very much. For example, when I had a stomach bug, I had to drink 7-Up, and I hated 7-Up. But my mother made me drink it. Or when I was in the 6th grade, I really, really, really wanted a pair of Jordache jeans. And they wouldn't buy them for me. Yeah. We don't make choices when we're kids about when and where to cross the street, when we're going to go to bed. Slaves also don't get to make their own choices. The difference is with kids, their parents are teaching them how to grow up into adults that can take care of themselves, right? Who will know when I'm tired I should go to bed and get some sleep. Who will know I shouldn't just run out into the street willy-nilly. Who will know that sometimes what we want is not in our budget. And maybe we need some self-restraint. Who will know when I'm sick, sometimes I have to do some things that I don't want to do for the good of my own body. And so these Israelites came out of Egypt like these little children who had not been allowed for generations to make decisions for themselves about how to live. And not only that, they had been enslaved by a system that was all about productivity, money, and power. All about productivity, money, and power. And so everything that Pharaoh did was centered around those things. Those Israelites had the gall to ask for some time off to worship. They're slaves. He needed to exert his power. And what did he do? He demanded more productivity from them. You will make the same number of bricks you always made, but we are not going to give you the straw. You need to collect the straw on your own. And so when they got free, and they were at the foot of Mount Sinai, they were like these little kids who had no idea how to make good decisions on their own. And so God gave them what in the Bible is actually better translated as the 10 words. He gave them these 10 words that were all meant to show them how to live a life in response to the freedom that they had been given. Notice, too, that just like with Abraham, they did not do anything to deserve to be set free. And in fact, God did not come up to them and say, I am the Lord your God, have no other gods but me. You shall not take my name in vain. Honor your father and your mother. Do not steal, do not covet. And if you do all those things, then I will free you from slavery. That's not how it went, was it? It wasn't do the right things and then I will free you. It was, I have set you free. Now live as people who are responding to that love and that grace that I have given you by walking in the right way, by loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself, because after all, that is the greatest commandment, yes? And those 10 commandments are divided up into 2 tablets. And one of the tablets contains all of the commandments that have to do with loving God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not take my name in vain. And the other tablet has all of the commandments that has to do with loving your neighbor. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie. So we're set free. And then we're told, trust in the Lord and love him with all that you are, and your neighbor as yourself. And we find that if we trust in the Lord, that the commandments just kind of happen. Let's take a look at these for a moment. You shall have no other gods but me. This is a strange statement if you're a monotheist, right? If you believe in one God, you shall have no other gods but me. First of all, we need to understand that the world in which the Israelites lived when they went to Mount Sinai was not a monotheistic one. But more than that, we all worship other gods, don't we? It would be a lie if we said that we do not trust in anything or anyone else to save us. Just look for a moment at the big feelings surrounding the next presidential election. If you want to know who and what people tend to worship, as well as God. Just look at the amount of time we spend poring over our finances. If you want to know who and what we trust to save us besides God. So this is really a question of trust. Do you, Walt Johnson, do you, Cindy Dixon, do I, Jen Fulton, trust God enough to put no other gods before him? You shall not make for yourself any idol. You're not going to create a picture or a statue of what God is, because God cannot be contained in that. God is bigger and greater than anything else that we can imagine. And when we try to put God in a box, as an old man with an old long white beard, or whatever else we might think of, we are refusing to trust in the enormity of God. You shall not invoke with malice the name of the Lord your God. You know, we tend to think of this as people saying, "Oh my God," when they're surprised. But there are things that are much worse, such as saying, "I swear to God," and then lying about it. I swear to God, I was sick the other day, when really I just wanted the day off, right? I swear to God, I was where I said I was, when really I was off having fun. That breaks that commandment. This also breaks that commandment. God damn you, Bob Berkey. Because who can curse or damn anyone? Not me. That is invoking with malice the name of the Lord our God. And that means that we do not trust God enough to trust God to do with those we might be mad at what God judges as right. And that we do not trust God enough to tell the truth when we say his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. This is a big one. How many of us really do this? Do no work for one day of the week. Because that's what this is supposed to mean. This commandment actually doesn't say anything about worship. So if you say, I go to church regularly on Sunday, that's not keeping this commandment. This commandment is about removing ourselves from a system which values productivity so much that we have a hard time removing ourselves from that, right? Because if I'm not working 7 days a week at something, the whole dang world might fall apart. Or at least my whole dang world might fall apart. Do we trust our God enough to remove ourselves from a system of the worship of productivity enough to take 1 day off a week? Honor your father and your mother. This really, it doesn't say obey your father and your mother. It says honor them. We all know how often older people say about younger people, oh, they're the worst. They don't have the right values. And how often younger people say of older people, they're the worst. They keep trying to make me do X, Y, and Z. They don't understand what the world is like today. And so God was trying to heal those rifts between generations and saying, people, learn from one another, honor one another, and saying to young people, you take care of your elders when they can no longer take care of themselves. And I tell you what, that takes trust in God. I know. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not be a false witness. All of this requires that we trust, and not coveting, that we trust God enough to be content with what we have and to let people be who they are and trust that God will sort it all out at the end. It's all about trusting God, folks, and about loving God and loving neighbor. So as Jesus pointed out later in the Gospels, just saying, I did the 10 Commandments, so I'm good. I guess when I go to confession, I'm going to have to commit to adultery even though I'm 9 years old. Whether or not we keep the 10 Commandments is not what is reckoned to us as righteousness. If we trust God, truly, the 10 Commandments will follow. If we practice the 10 Commandments, we may learn to trust God more. Right? If I actually stop working 1 day a week and I discover my life does not fall apart, I might learn, oh, maybe I can trust God. That is why the 10 Commandments are a big deal. Not because if we do them, we will be saved, but because we are saved because of our trust in God and our love for God and neighbor. And the 10 Commandments is how we respond. They're how we become grown-up Christians who have come out of slavery and seen the other side and live out that trust and that love. Amen.